The universe is not as large as we think. It only feels that way because our minds were born inside small rooms of understanding, tracing shadows on the walls and calling them infinity. We look at the night sky and imagine distance, imagine scale, imagine a cosmos too vast to ever touch. But what if that immensity is not a property of the universe at all? What if it is a limitation of the creature trying to comprehend it? For every star we fear, we cannot reach. There is a deeper truth whispering beneath the glow. Scale is not a law of nature. It is a story told by a brain that evolved to cross rivers, not galaxies. But then comes the discomfort. The quiet realization that maybe big and small are illusions we cling to because they help us feel oriented in a reality that refuses to shrink for our comfort. And as that illusion begins to tremble, awe enters through the cracks. Because if size is an invention, then so is the boundary we place between ourselves and everything beyond us. So the question changes. Not how big is the universe, but how small are we willing to remain? Before we measure the universe, we must understand the mind doing the measuring. We like to imagine that the universe is vast, unreachable, impossibly wide. But the first truth we must confront is simpler and far more unsettling. The universe is not the one trapped behind a wall of incomprehension. We are. The smallest room in the cosmos is not tucked between stars or hidden inside quantum foam. It is the chamber behind our eyes, where a nervous system stitched together by ancient survival strategies believes it can map infinity with tools built for a savanna. Our brain evolved not to understand the world, but to avoid being eaten by it. A mind shaped by predators, storms, hunger, and the fragile mathematics of staying alive was never meant to grasp galaxies or pass the silence between them. Yet here we stand, holding a universe in our thoughts, unaware that the very instrument we use to observe it may be limiting what we are allowed to see. The earliest humans measured distance with footsteps, with the time it took for a thrown spear to fall, with the fading of sounds carried by wind. Near meant safety, far meant danger. Large meant a mountain that blocked the horizon. Small meant a berry in the hand or a crack in the earth. These scales were never neutral facts. They were emotional categories that helped us decide whether to run or stay. So our brain carved the world into manageable pieces, shrinking the overwhelming into the comprehensible. It built a mental stage where nothing was allowed to be too big, too fast, or too distant to matter. And in that shrunken world, we survived. But the cost of survival was subtle. We began to believe the map was the territory, but the map was tiny. The territory was not. As our ancestors looked up at the night sky, they saw points of light sprinkled across a dome. Small, tame, arranged neatly like decorations above the campfire. They could not know each star dwarfed their entire world. Their eyes forced the cosmos into familiar proportions. Their minds quietly translated impossibility into something emotionally safe. They didn't shrink the universe intentionally. Their biology shrank it for them. A trick of perception, a trick of scale, a story whispered by neurons that believed they were telling the truth. Yet that evolutionary inheritance persists. Even now, with telescopes that pierce billions of years into the past, we still think of stars as dots and galaxies as swirls. The truth is so much larger than our inner language allows. A galaxy is not a shape. It is an ocean of suns. A cluster is not a pattern. It is a gravitational continent of cosmic storms. And the universe is not big. It is simply beyond the dimensions our minds are calibrated to hold. When we say something is vast, we are not describing the cosmos. We are describing the boundaries of our own comprehension. Still, every breakthrough in science has been a rebellion against this inherited smallness. We discovered atoms only when we built machines more patient than our senses. We discovered galaxies only when we let mirrors collect light longer than our lifetimes. We discovered the curvature of space-time only when we stopped trusting our intuition. Because intuition was designed for fruit trees, not superclusters. But the more we uncovered, the more another truth came into focus. Our brains are cartographers of illusion. They do not record reality. They compress it. They redraw it. They simplify it so aggressively that what we perceive is not the universe as it is, but the universe as it must appear for us to remain functional. And when you understand that, humility arrives. Consider the way the brain interprets near. A friend sitting across from you feels near because you can reach them. The moon, though distant, feels near because you can see it with your naked eyes. But Proxima Centauri, the nearest star, might as well not exist. Its distance does not fit into the vocabulary of human experience. Your brain offers no intuitive category for something 4 light years away. It is too large to be understood, so the mind quietly labels it far. The same category as a distant hill or a cloud drifting across summer sky. A star is placed emotionally beside a cloud. That is the scale of our distortion. And what about size? We say the sun is massive, but we imagine it as a sphere we could hold in thought. We say a black hole is enormous, but we imagine it as a dark circle we could draw with a fingertip. We imagine the Milky Way as a glowing spiral we could rotate with our minds, never realizing that what we are truly holding is an abstraction, a miniature, a conceptual toy that bears no resemblance to the ferocious magnitude of the real thing. Our consciousness protects us by reducing incomprehensible things into model-sized shadows. Without that reduction, our mental world would collapse under the weight of truth. But the mind does not admit that it is simplifying. It pretends the simplification is reality. Every perception you have ever had is a compromise, a negotiated truce between the infinite and the finite organ trying to represent it. Your thoughts are not windows, they are filters. They permit only what the mind can handle, excluding what it cannot. Infinity is edited into fragments. Immensity is translated into metaphor. The true scale of the cosmos becomes a gentle hum in the background, always present yet always diluted to fit inside a biological container that never asked for such responsibility. And still, we push against those walls, because somewhere inside us is a rebellious spark, the part of the mind that wants to break free of the small room it inherited. It is the same spark that made ancient humans draw constellations, not realizing they were stitching myths into the night. It is the same spark that pushed Aristotle to imagine the structure of all existence, even as his senses misled him. It is the spark that drove Galileo to lift a telescope toward the sky, breaking the ceiling of assumed knowledge. And today it is the spark that drives physicists, philosophers, dreamers, and every curious soul who has ever stared into darkness and whispered, "There is more." Yet the struggle remains. Evolution built a brain excellent for survival, but poor for cosmic comprehension. It gave us the tools to dodge predators, not to conceptualize multiple dimensions. It gave us emotional heuristics, small, quick judgments, to determine whether a shape was a threat, but no intuitive language for quantum uncertainty or galactic timescales. It gave us fear of heights, but not fear of expanding spacetime. And so, our fascination with the universe is always a form of rebellion, a revolt against cognitive limits written into our biology. But rebellion does not erase limitation. Even when we understand, intellectually, that the universe is unimaginably vast, we still feel it as a picture, an idea, a simplified model. No matter how far our instruments reach, the brain still interprets the cosmos through architecture built for survival. It cannot help it. This is the design. The small room persists. And so, the question grows more curious. Are we discovering the universe? Or are we discovering the boundaries of the mind, trying to imagine it? Because every time we expand our understanding, the universe seems to grow. But the universe is not expanding in our thoughts because it changed. It expands because our mental walls shift. Each discovery pushes the horizon outward, not in space, but in perception. When we found out the Milky Way was not the whole universe, the universe did not grow. Our minds did. When we learned galaxies drift apart, space-time did not suddenly stretch. Our comprehension stretched. The cosmos is stable. The mind is the thing evolving. And perhaps the greatest illusion of all is believing that the universe is incomprehensible. In truth, it may not be incomprehensible. It may simply be too large for a mind that cannot yet hold it. What we call mystery may be nothing more than the shadow of our own limitation. What we call impossible to imagine may be perfectly ordinary to a form of consciousness not bound by neural constraints. Maybe the universe is only as mysterious as the size of the room we are thinking inside, and if that room is small, then so is everything inside it. Which leads us to an unsettling thought, one that hangs gently in the air, refusing to fade. If our minds are too small to grasp the universe, what have we been seeing all this time? We measure everything the same way we measure ourselves, in small steps. A meter, a kilometer, a day's walk, a horizon's width. These are the scales we inherited from a world that never asked us to understand more than the distance to shelter or the time it took for seasons to turn. But the moment we lift our eyes even slightly above that familiar floor, the ground slips beneath us. The numbers grow too quickly. The meaning thins too fast. Somewhere between a mountain and a moon, the human mind loses its footing. We try to count the uncountable with tools built for counting apples, and in that struggle, we reveal something profound. The universe has always been too large for our ancient arithmetic. We simply insisted on bringing the wrong ruler. A kilometer is friendly. 1,000 of something. A measure you can walk, imagine, feel. 10 kilometers stretches your breath. 100 begins to blur into abstraction. But your mind still follows it with an effort, like squinting at something just beyond focus. But 1,000 kilometers, that is the first crack. That is where imagination stutters. 1,000 kilometers. Now you are no longer measuring anything. The body evolved to sense. You are wandering into territory where distance stops being a path and becomes a concept. And yet, even this staggering space, this gulf larger than any journey in human history, fits comfortably inside the Earth. A sphere so small in the cosmic hierarchy that it barely registers as a speck, and already the numbers strain us. Then we step outward, and everything collapses again. The distance from Earth to the Moon is 384,000 kilometers, a number that looks manageable on paper until you try to feel it. Try to imagine driving it. Try to imagine walking it. Try to imagine it as anything more than a line between two dots on a diagram. Suddenly, the mind gives up. It compresses the moon into a nearby ornament because it cannot store the true scale. But even that vast stretch is nothing compared to the Earth's orbit around the Sun. 1 astronomical unit, 150 million kilometers. A number so far outside human experience that we must reduce it simply to a name, a label, a convenient placeholder for something the brain refuses to visualize. This is the first great fracture, the point where numbers obey us, but meaning does not. We say 1 astronomical unit like it is a step, but each of those kilometers is as real as the road under your feet. Each one could hold a city. Each 1,000 could hold a nation. Each million could hold a world, and the sun sits all those worlds away, burning in a silence so complete we can only describe it through metaphor. Yet this distance, this ocean of emptiness, is still only the first rung on a ladder that ascends into pure incomprehension. Because now we introduce light. Light which moves faster than anything we know. Light which could circle the earth 7 times in a single second. Light which turns time into a shadow and distance into delay. We use it as a cosmic measuring stick, not because we understand it, but because nothing else will do. And so we learn a number. Light travels nearly 300,000 kilometers each second. But even that fails to move us. A second is too small. A kilometer is too ordinary. Together, they dissolve into a statistic with no emotional weight. Yet if you could chase a beam of light, if you could ride it for a minute, you would travel farther than every plane, ship, car, and footstep in human history combined. That is when numbers break us again. Because now we leave the Earth's orbit entirely. Light takes 8 minutes to reach us from the Sun, 43 minutes to reach Jupiter, 4 hours to reach Neptune. These are not distances, these are insults to intuition. Our ancestors walked for days to cross deserts. They sailed for months to reach new continents. But light, the fastest thing that exists, requires hours to cross our small solar system. That alone should shatter any confidence we have in human intuition. But the universe always demands more. So we step outward again. The nearest star, Proxima Centauri, sits 4.2 light years away. That means if you traveled at the speed of light, the absolute speed limit of the universe, it would still take over 4 years to arrive. If you traveled at the speed of the fastest human spacecraft ever launched, it would take tens of thousands of years. And suddenly, the mind folds in on itself. Because what is a year of travel? What is a decade? What is a millennium? The scales begin to drift into absurdity. A distance so large that even the fastest conceivable journey feels like a pilgrimage across eternity. And here comes the deeper fracture. We think a light year is a distance, but it isn't. It's an act of surrender. It is the acknowledgement that kilometers no longer cooperate. It is a confession that numbers have lost their ability to describe reality. A light year is not something you can picture. It is something you accept. It is the brain raising its hands and saying, "This is beyond me." But our universe doesn't stop there. It keeps climbing. We discover thousands of stars, millions. Then we speak of the Milky Way, our home galaxy, 100,000 light years across. Imagine that, or rather fail to imagine it. Try to stretch your thoughts across 100,000 years. Try to visualize light itself traveling for longer than all of recorded human history. Try to hold that span inside your mind without it cracking like thin glass. 100,000 light years is not a size. It is a humbling. It is the scale at which numbers dissolve into silence. And then, the next leap, galaxies are not alone. They cluster. They flow into filaments. They form structures so enormous that calling them large is like calling the ocean damp. We measure these distances not in light years now, but in megaparsecs, millions of parsecs, each parsec itself over 3 light years long. A megaparsec is 3 million light years. A gigaparsec is a billion. These are the scales at which language breaks. Words become symbols. Symbols become placeholders. Placeholders become confessions of our own limits. Because how do you describe a billion light years? How do you narrate a distance that even light, the universe's fastest messenger, cannot cross in less than a cosmic epoch? You can say the number, you can write it down, but you cannot feel it. And that is the moment where human meaning collapses, where curiosity mutates into vertigo, where awe turns into a kind of trembling recognition. The universe has not grown at all. We simply reach the edge of what it is possible for a biological mind to imagine. This is the point where the viewer begins to sense the truth. Numbers are no longer doing what numbers are supposed to do. They are no longer measuring. They are no longer describing. They have slipped into something else, something paradoxical, something emotional. Because beyond a certain threshold, the universe can only be understood as a feeling of enormity, a feeling of insignificance, a feeling of stretching across a mental landscape that was never designed for this journey. We try to climb the ladder of scale, but it grows faster than we can ascend. We try to wrap our minds around distances that make Earth seem like an atom, but the mind refuses to stretch that far. So we compress, we simplify, we draw tiny spirals to represent galaxies, unaware that each spiral holds more stars than every grain of sand on every shore of Earth. We draw lines between clusters, unaware that each line spans unimaginable gulfs. We model the cosmic web and call it beautiful, not realizing that the beauty comes from our failure to comprehend its brutality of scale. Yet this is not a defeat. This is the true gift of astronomy. It forces us to confront the edge of our cognitive map. It forces us to expand the boundaries of thought, not because the universe needs us to, but because we cannot help ourselves. Something in us aches to understand. Something in us wants to follow the numbers even when they become meaningless. Something in us reaches for awe, as if awe were oxygen. But awe is not an explanation. Awe is the sensation that arrives when explanations fail. And that is where we arrive now. After kilometers, after astronomical units, after light years and megaparsecs, after the collapse of language and the surrender of imagination, we find ourselves in a territory where numbers no longer describe reality. They only hint at it. They gesture towards something our minds cannot hold, like shadows cast by a fire we cannot approach. And in that moment, something quiet happens, something profound, something that feels like standing at the edge of a cliff inside your own thoughts. Beyond a certain point, scale becomes not a number, but a feeling. Time is the first illusion we ever learned, and the last one we ever question. We feel it as a pulse, a rhythm, a gentle drift from one moment to the next. Our ancestors measured it in heartbeats and shadows, in moons and migrations, in the pattern of cold winters and warm harvests. Time was local, personal, intimate, a companion that moved just slowly enough for the mind to believe it understood. But the universe has never cared about our sense of duration. It stretches minutes into millennia, millennia into epochs, epochs into eternities, and the moment we step outside the narrow corridor of human experience, our intuition collapses. Because time, not space, is the true giant we have never learned to see. A second is familiar, a minute is comfortable, an hour is the scaffold for our lives. But imagine 1,000 years. Try to feel it, not as a number, but as a lived span. Imagine the rise and fall of civilizations inside a single breath of cosmic time. Imagine every person you have ever known fading into memory before the first star on the horizon even ignites. Already your mind resists. Already the scale bends. Already time stretches beyond the reach of the imagination, like a horizon that retreats as you walk toward it. Yet 1,000 years is nothing. A ripple on the surface of a much deeper ocean. Now consider 1,000,000 years. 1,000,000. The mind cannot do it. It tries to stack centuries like pebbles, but the tower collapses. Human language thins. Human imagination buckles. 1,000,000 years is long enough for mountains to rise and crumble, for species to appear and vanish, for the planet itself to inhale and exhale continents. And yet, in cosmic terms, 1,000,000 years is barely a blink. It is the quiet moment before the real story begins. Because to understand the universe, we must reach back, not millions, not billions, but to the very edge of time itself. 13.8 billion years. A number we recite easily, the way children recite fairy tales they do not understand. But try to feel those years. Try to live them in your thoughts. Try to let your mind stretch across that timeline without tearing. You can't. None of us can. Because we are creatures born inside a moment so brief that the cosmic story dwarfs us before we even attempt to read it. Let us step back anyway. Step into a history that no brain was designed to hold. In the beginning, or rather, in the moment we call the beginning, time itself flickered into existence. Not a gentle unfolding, but a violent emergence. A universe compressed into a volume smaller than a proton erupted into being. The first interval of time had a name, blank time. A number so small it defies intuition. 1/10,000th of a billionth of a billionth of a billionth of a second. This is not a duration the mind can comprehend. It is less than a whisper inside a heartbeat. Less than an idea trying to form. Less than the space between two thoughts. Yet inside that nearly non-existent moment, the seeds of everything were planted. Then inflation came. A brief, explosive expansion that lasted no time at all, yet set the entire cosmic stage. In a fraction of a second, the universe grew from subatomic to astronomical. The timeline fractures again. Because what does it mean to say that everything you have ever seen, loved, feared, or imagined came from a moment so brief that language cannot hold it? Human intuition cannot contain such violence, such brevity, such scale. Inflation is not an event. It is a boundary between what the mind can imagine and what it simply must accept. Then time slowed. Not enough for us to understand, but enough for physics to take shape. Seconds became meaningful. Minutes began to matter. In the first 3 minutes, the universe forged the lightest elements: hydrogen, helium, a trace of lithium, the raw materials from which every star would one day ignite. 3 minutes, the length of a song, the time it takes to tie your shoes, or boil water, or lose a train of thought. Yet these 3 minutes shape the next 13 billion years. This is where temporal vertigo begins. A moment we can imagine in our daily lives becomes a moment that determined the fate of galaxies. But the universe did not rush. It waited. For hundreds of thousands of years, it cooled in darkness. No stars, no planets, no light, only a thick fog of particles drifting slowly apart, like a dream without a dreamer. This era lasted long enough for humanity to evolve 100 times over. Long enough for mountains to rise and vanish if Earth had existed. Long enough for every story we have ever told to flicker out and be forgotten. Yet the universe was still an infant, barely awake, barely formed. Then at last, the fog thinned. Light broke free, the cosmic microwave background, a soft glow that still bathes the universe today, was released. A relic older than any star, older than any atom inside you. When we look at that light, we see time itself stretched thin. We stare not across space, but across 13 billion years of memory, and the brain cannot process it. It cannot feel the age of that glow. It cannot understand what it means to witness the oldest light in existence. So again, it simplifies. It turns eternity into a photograph, another illusion, another betrayal of scale. Then came the first stars, massive, unstable giants that burned hot and died fast, flooding the darkness with the first true starlight. These stars lived only a few million years, mere sparks compared to the slow glow of the sun. Yet in their violent deaths they forged the heavier elements: carbon, oxygen, iron, the ingredients of life. These ancient stars lived and died long before Earth existed, long before the atoms inside your blood were even imagined. Your body is built from the ashes of stars whose entire lifespans fit inside a sliver of cosmic time. You're older than any history you can comprehend, but younger than the universe you inhabit. Again, intuition fails. Again, scale bends. Again, time stretches beyond meaning. Galaxies formed, spun, collided. The universe grew structures so vast they cannot be described without metaphor. And through all of this, billions of years passed quietly, like deep breaths drawn by a cosmos in meditation. Human history, all of it, occupies only the thinnest film at the surface of this vast temporal ocean. If the universe's lifetime were compressed into a single year, modern humans would appear in the last few seconds before midnight on December 31st. Every empire, every war, every discovery, every dream would fit inside a moment too small to register. And yet we call the universe old. We call it ancient. We speak of 13.8 billion years, as though the number itself provides understanding. But the truth is simpler. 13.8 billion years is not old. Our mental timeline is simply too short. We evolved inside a world where memory fades after decades, where lifetimes rarely stretch beyond a century, where the most ancient stories disappear after a few thousand years. Our brains are calibrated for immediacy, for childhood, adulthood, aging, for the pattern of sunrise and the passing of seasons. not for cosmic epochs, not for aeons, not for durations so long that meaning itself dissolves. Time on cosmic scales is not something we can imagine. It is something we must surrender to. So, we try metaphors. We say, the universe took billions of years to build galaxies, but the mind translates it into a polite delay, not an incomprehensible stretch. We say stars live for billions of years, but our intuition quietly imagines something long-lived, not something practically eternal. We say Earth is 4.5 billion years old, but the mind shrinks it to a manageable size, like a rock weathered over a few seasons. We cannot help it. We compress everything. We shrink time the same way we shrink distance. We build maps inside our minds that flatten eternity until it feels safe. Yet, time refuses to be flattened. It presses against us. It expands beyond our grasp. It forces us to confront the limits of our perception. And in that confrontation, wonder emerges. A quiet wonder. The kind that arrives only when you realize how small your place is inside a story too large to tell in human language. Because time is bigger than space, bigger than stars, bigger than imagination. It is the stage on which all existence unfolds. And the mind, that tiny island of awareness, floats upon it like a leaf on a limitless sea. We grasp seconds, we taste minutes, we endure years, but billions. Billions of years transform the universe into something that cannot be pictured, only felt. Something that does not fit inside the narrow windows of experience, no matter how wide we stretch them. And so we arrive at the paradox. We say, the universe is ancient, but perhaps our minds are simply young. We believe we live in a universe we can see. Stars, planets, nebulae, galaxies, luminous ornaments suspended in cosmic darkness. We imagine that what appears before us is reality. The full tapestry, the complete story, the totality of existence presented honestly to our eyes. But this belief, comforting as it feels, is the greatest misconception in human history. Because the universe we see is not the universe at all. It is only the thinnest visible layer, a fragile film floating atop a vast ocean of forces, fields, and matter we cannot perceive. The cosmos is not large, it is hidden. 95% of everything, is invisible. And we walk through this darkness unaware that our senses evolve not to reveal truth, but to filter it. Consider what your eyes are. Two small biological detectors, tuned only to a tiny sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum. Less than 1% of all light that exists. Everything outside that range, the microwaves that whisper of the universe's birth, the ultraviolet storms erupting from young stars, the gamma rays bursting from black hole collisions, passes through you without acknowledgement. You are bathed in invisible oceans every moment of your life. Your body swims through fields and forces that your mind cannot feel. Reality surrounds you like an undiscovered continent, yet your senses insist you inhabit a small, tame world. This is the first veil. The second veil is stranger. The matter that builds stars and planets, atoms, molecules, the familiar building blocks of existence, accounts for only 5% of the universe. 5%. Everything we study, everything we touch, everything we have ever seen is just this tiny fraction. Even our greatest telescopes, which can peer across billions of years, reveal only this luminous minority. But galaxies do not behave as if they are made only from what we see. Their stars orbit too fast. Their clusters cling together too tightly. Something unseen holds them in place. Something massive. Something everywhere. We call it dark matter, not because we understand it, but because we do not. Dark matter, a phrase that feels almost poetic in its vagueness. We know it outweighs visible matter 5 to 1. We know it forms giant halos around galaxies, sculpting their shape like invisible hands. We know entire cosmic structures, filaments stretching hundreds of millions of light years, are woven from it. But what is it? A particle? A field? A remnant of physics deeper than the standard model? The truth is simple. We do not know. We only know that without it, the universe would be unrecognizable. Stars would drift apart. Structure would unravel. Galaxies would never have formed at all. Dark matter is the skeleton of the cosmos, yet we cannot see it, touch it, or measure it directly. We infer its existence the way we infer wind from the bending of trees. We know only its effects, not its essence. And then comes the third veil, darker, larger, more bewildering still. In the late 1990s, astronomers discovered that the universe's expansion is accelerating. Instead of gravity slowing things down, something was pushing space-time apart, stretching it, speeding it, driving galaxies away from one another faster and faster with every passing moment. This force accounts for nearly 70% of all energy in the universe. We call it dark energy. Again, not because it is understood, but because the mind must place a placeholder where comprehension fails. Dark energy is not a thing we can picture. It is not a substance. It is a property of space-time itself, a pressure inherent in the fabric of existence, and it dictates the fate of everything. Together, dark matter and dark energy comprise 95% of reality, 95% unseen, 95% unfelt, 95% incompatible with human intuition. We evolved to grasp the path of a thrown spear, not the expansion rate of the cosmos. We evolved to sense predators in bushes, not invisible forces stretching the universe. We evolved to understand the weight of stones, not the mass of invisible halos binding galaxies. The mind is too young, too narrow, too tuned to survival, to comprehend what truly exists. And yet, here we stand, small creatures with limited senses, trying desperately to understand a universe built from things we were never meant to detect. But the unseen does not end with dark matter or dark energy. Beneath even these mysteries lies a deeper truth: the quantum fields, the invisible lattice of energy that permeates all of space, bubbling with particles that appear and vanish in ceaseless fluctuations. Reality at its foundation is not smooth, not empty, not calm. It is a restless ocean of probabilities, a storm of ephemeral excitations that form and dissolve in less than a trillionth of a second. Every atom in your body is the result of these fields interacting, dancing, collapsing into form. You feel solid, yet solidity is an illusion created by quantum forces repelling one another. You feel separate from the world, yet the same fields that form you form everything else. Your senses hide this. They must hide it. You could not function if you saw particles winking in and out, if you felt quantum foam roiling beneath you, if you perceived the universe at its true resolution. The mind was never designed for such exposure. It evolved to simplify the unbearable, to smooth the chaotic, to draw clean edges around blurry truths. And so, it gives you a world of objects, a world of color, a world of stability, a world fit for survival, not for understanding. We do not perceive reality. We perceive a model of reality that is safe enough to navigate. This is the fourth veil. Every sense you have is a filter. Every perception you trust is a reduction. You do not see electromagnetic fields. You do not feel neutrinos streaming through your body by the trillions each second. You do not sense the gravitational pull of distant galaxies. You do not witness the dark matter currents guiding the cosmic web. You do not perceive the vacuum energy stretching space. You do not hear the quiet hiss of the microwave background, the universe's oldest whisper. You are surrounded by information, but your mind captures only a thin beam of what exists. A single strand pulled from a vast tapestry, and yet we assume the tapestry looks like the strand. We assume that what we see is what is there. We assume that reality is made from surfaces, colors, shapes. But these are interpretations, not ingredients. The real universe, the one beneath perception, is a storm of hidden matter, invisible forces, quantum foundations, and dark expansion. It bends space. It flows through galaxies. It fuels the future itself. The cosmos is not big. It is layered, deep, stacked with mysteries beneath every visible surface. We are not small because the universe is large. We are small because our senses carve reality into bite-sized pieces, leaving most of existence untouched. Consider how unsettling this truly is. The stars you see at night, bright, crisp, eternal, are the minority. The galaxies they inhabit ride on scaffolding you cannot detect. Their motions obey laws written by matter you cannot touch. Their destiny is governed by a pressure your intuition cannot feel. The visible cosmos is the exception, not the rule. We navigate a universe that is almost entirely hidden, as though walking through fog guided only by the faint glow of distant lanterns. And yet, in this ignorance, we feel confident. We draw models, we tell stories, we imagine the universe as a place of planets and starlight, not shadows and unseen forces. But the story is incomplete. 95% incomplete. We live in a universe we barely know. A universe where the most powerful actors are invisible. A universe where the forces shaping galaxies are as hidden from us as thoughts are from stone. A universe where our maps show islands, but not the ocean that connects them. This is the turning point, the place where science dissolves into philosophy. Because if our senses reveal only a fraction of reality, then what is the universe really made of? If we evolved to detect only what helped us survive, then what truths have we never touched? If most of existence hides beyond perception, how much of what we believe is merely a human convenience, a simplification of something vaster than we can ever imagine? Perhaps the universe is not large. Perhaps it is dense with mystery. Perhaps what overwhelms us is not its size, but its depth. A depth measured not in kilometers, but in layers of unseen reality stacked beneath every photon we capture. And the deeper we look, the more the visible cosmos shrinks. Stars become sparks, galaxies become outlines. The cosmic web becomes a ghostly silhouette of something far grander beneath it. The 5% we see is nothing more than the decorative surface of a universe defined by what does not appear. And so we must face the most unsettling question of all. If most of the universe cannot be seen, how can we claim to understand its size? There is a horizon inside you, though you cannot see it. A boundary where thought dissolves, where intuition falters, where the mind quietly admits it has reached the limit of what it was ever built to hold. We speak often of the edge of the universe, the farthest galaxies, the fading afterglow of creation. But rarely do we speak of the edge within the observer, the cognitive horizon, the place where comprehension thins to transparency, the way air thins on a mountain peak. It is here, long before we touch infinity, that the human mind begins to tremble. Our thoughts are born from a 3-pound organ sculpted by evolution to solve local problems. How to gather food, how to build shelter, how to predict the behavior of predators and companions. The brain did not evolve to ponder the curvature of space-time or the topology of extra dimensions. It did not evolve to imagine infinite sets or multiverses. It evolved to keep us alive. Everything else has been improvisation, a miracle stitched atop instincts older than language. And yet, we dare to aim this small instrument at the highest questions the cosmos offers. We try to imagine eternity with a mind built for afternoon shadows. This is the first illusion, that intuition can lead us into infinity. It cannot. Intuition was shaped by the narrowness of Earth, not the vastness of the universe. It teaches us that all things move slowly, but subatomic particles flicker out of existence in trillions of a second. It teaches us that objects remain where we place them, yet quantum fields blur every boundary. It teaches us that straight lines are natural, yet space itself curves beneath the weight of matter. The mind is a storyteller, not a scientist, and its stories come from a time when survival mattered more than truth. But the universe does not bend to intuition. It bends to mathematics, and mathematics does not care whether the brain understands it. Imagine the number 1000. Simple, graspable. Imagine a million. Difficult but not impossible. Imagine a billion. The scale stretches. A trillion. The mind begins to lose grip. A quadrillion. The cognitive horizon cracks. Not because the number is too large for mathematics, but because it is too large for the neural architecture trying to imagine it. You can write the number, you can say the number, but you cannot feel it, not truly. The gap between symbol and understanding widens until the symbol becomes hollow. Now imagine infinity. Not the poetic infinity of dreams, but the real, mathematical infinity. Unbounded, unending, larger than all numbers combined. The mind tries to picture it as endless space, an infinite grid, an eternal line. But these are metaphors, attempts, shadows cast by a concept the brain cannot visualize because visualization itself is a finite act. Infinity cannot be pictured by a mind that dies. It can only be reasoned about. And reasoning is not the same as comprehension. This is the second illusion, that understanding something logically means we understand it intuitively. We do not. Logic can climb to places intuition cannot follow. But when we stand at the summit, we find ourselves breathless, unable to reconcile the view with the landscape we evolved to navigate. Infinity is not a distance. It is a cognitive failure we have named. And yet the mind pushes onward. Consider dimensionality. You live in 3 spatial dimensions. Up, down, left, right, forward, back. You navigate easily within them. You feel at home. But imagine a 4th spatial dimension. Not time. A true geometric dimension perpendicular to all 3 we know. Try to visualize it. Your mind will twist, flatten, distort the idea back into familiar shapes. You might imagine a shadow or a reflection, but you will not imagine the real thing. The mind cannot. It has no evolutionary reason to. And so, Dimensionality beyond the familiar becomes another symbol we manipulate without truly comprehending. Or consider entropy, information theory, the quantum vacuum, the fabric of space-time. These are not ideas built from human experience. They are ideas built in defiance of human experience. Our minds recoil not because they are complex, but because they do not resemble anything our ancestors ever encountered. The universe may not be strange. We may simply be limited. This is the tragedy of intelligence. It awakens inside a creature unequipped to understand the world that created it. We build telescopes, particle accelerators, gravitational wave detectors, extensions of the mind, prosthetics for comprehension. We invent mathematics to reach beyond the horizon our neurons impose. We construct models that contradict every instinct we have, because instinct is earthbound and the universe is not. We expand our intellectual reach as far as the scaffolding of the brain allows. But the scaffolding is finite. It is built from cells that fatigue, from synapses that saturate, from circuits tuned for survival, not revelation. And when we push too far, the horizon appears. It appears in our language, when metaphors replace clarity, when complexity becomes opacity, when we say curved space, or multiverse, or quantum field, and feel only the echo of meaning, not the meaning itself. The brain responds by simplifying, compressing, shrinking the ungraspable into digestible symbols. But symbols are not reality. They are shadows of understanding, cast by a light too dim to illuminate the whole structure. The cognitive horizon also appears in our emotions. Wonder, fear, confusion. These are responses not to the universe itself, but to the pressure of trying to imagine more than the mind can hold. Awe is the feeling of standing close to the limit. Dread is the feeling of stepping past it. Stillness is the acceptance that follows. And yet, we continue. We ask questions no ape should be able to formulate. We contemplate the mathematics of universes we cannot see. We study infinities we cannot imagine. We explore realities we cannot directly perceive. The mind strains, stretches, adapts, but always within the constraints of its architecture. A fish may dream of flight, but it will dream with gills. This is the third illusion, that thinking harder will break the horizon. It will not. The cognitive horizon is not a skill gap. It is a structural limit, a boundary defined by the biological substrate of thought itself. A neuron cannot comprehend concepts that require more memory, dimensionality, or abstraction than its network supports. And the universe contains structures of thought that would require more neurons than a brain could ever hold. Perhaps more than any physical brain could ever hold. Perhaps more than any finite mind could ever hold. But this limit is not a failure. It is a mirror. It reveals us, fragile, finite, temporary. It forces humility. It forces reflection. It forces the acceptance that we do not stand at the center of understanding, but at its outer edge. And from this edge, the universe becomes not a problem to solve, but a mystery to witness. A horizon that moves as we move, reminding us that comprehension has a boundary woven into the fabric of the observer. So where does the universe end? Does it end in distance, in time, in dimensionality? Or does it end in the limits of the mind trying to understand it? Perhaps infinity is not unreachable. Perhaps it is simply unthinkable. Perhaps the universe is not incomprehensible. Perhaps the instrument we use to comprehend it is too small, too narrow, too deeply rooted in the logic of survival to ever hold the shape of eternity. And here, in this quiet realization, something shifts, not in the universe, in us. We feel the vulnerability of a mind that tries to see beyond itself, the loneliness of intelligence confronting its own ceiling, the tenderness of knowing that understanding is finite, but wonder is not, the acceptance that the questions we ask may be larger than the architecture that asks them. And so, we arrive at the softest truth of all, the one that settles into silence after the striving ends. Perhaps the edge of the universe is not out there, but inside us. There is a moment somewhere between questioning and understanding when the very idea of size begins to unravel. A moment when big and small stop behaving like real categories and start dissolving into artifacts of a mind obsessed with measurement. We rely so heavily on the concept of scale that we forget it is something we invented. A scaffold for a species that needed to judge distances, boundaries, territories. But the universe has never promised to operate according to the geometry our ancestors drew in the dirt. It has never promised edges. It has never promised a shape the mind can visualize. And so when we ask, how big is the universe? We are asking a question that may not make sense in the language of reality. Only in the language of humans, because size only exists in worlds with familiar coordinates, worlds where straight lines behave, where distances add neatly, where space does not fold, twist, bend, or expand beneath your feet. But the universe is not such a world. It is curved, dynamic, elastic, a geometry that laughs softly at rulers and tape measures. When Einstein revealed that gravity is not a force but the bending of space-time itself, the ground gave way beneath every intuitive notion of size we had ever held. Suddenly, a straight path was no longer the shortest. Suddenly, parallel lines could meet. Suddenly, the shape of the universe depended on energy, matter, and the mass of things unseen. The cosmos was not a stage. It was a participant. And once space can bend, size stops behaving. Imagine traveling in a straight line forever and eventually returning to the point where you began. Not because you turned, but because the space around you curved. A finite universe with no edges. A cosmos that encloses itself without needing a boundary. The mind panics at this idea, trying desperately to picture a higher dimensional shape, trying to wrap space into a sphere, a torus, something familiar. But these are metaphors, attempts. We cannot visualize four-dimensional curvature. We can only sense its consequences, like shadows cast by a shape too large to hold in thought. And so another illusion breaks, the illusion that size must correspond to limits. A universe with no boundary can still be finite. A universe with infinite extension can still be small in higher dimensions. Scale becomes slippery. Edges evaporate. The cosmos becomes an object that cannot be grasped as large or small because those distinctions do not apply. Now consider expansion. Not objects rushing outward through space, but space itself stretching from within. This alone breaks our geometry. If space expands, then distance is not fixed. If distance is not fixed, then size is fluid. What does it mean to say that galaxies are billions of light years away when the very fabric between them continually unfolds? What does it mean to say the universe is one size when its edges, if they exist at all, recede faster than the speed of light? The question, how big is the universe, becomes like asking, how big is a breath? It changes as soon as you try to measure it. But the universe does not ask to be measured. Only we do. We cling to the idea of size because it gives us orientation. Without it, we drift. So when cosmologists say the observable universe is 93 billion light years across, the mind seizes on the number as if it were an anchor. But that number describes only the portion of the cosmos we can see. A sphere carved out by the speed of light and the age of time. Beyond that sphere may lie infinite expanse, or folded geometry, or repeating patterns, or a region so curved it reconnects with itself, or something stranger, something without analogy, something the human mind cannot map because it is not designed to imagine unbounded existence. And here, the mind protests. It tries to picture infinity. It tries to visualize endless extension. But infinity is not a place, and extension is not a shape. Infinity is a condition of being unmeasurable, uncontainable. It is what remains when size has stopped being relevant. The brain, trained to categorize, panics in its presence. But this panic is not a reflection of the universe. It is a reflection of our limits. What if the universe is not infinite? What if it only behaves like something beyond size? What if size itself is the wrong lens, the wrong metaphor, the wrong question? To understand why, we must look deeper into the strange machinery beneath perception, into dimensions we cannot touch. In string theory and other advanced frameworks, the universe may possess additional spatial dimensions curled so tightly that we never detect them. They are not small in the human sense. They are compact, hidden, necessary. They shape the laws of physics while remaining invisible to the senses. If space has more dimensions than we perceive, then every notion of size derived from three-dimensional intuition is flawed. A universe could be enormous in 3 dimensions and tiny in 7, or compact in 3 and vast in 11. We cannot know because our perception is restricted to the projection of a deeper structure. Like a creature living on a sheet of paper, trying to guess the shape of the book. This is where scale collapses. Not in the universe, but in us. We think of size as something measurable, but measurement itself is a property of consciousness, a survival tool, a language, a simplification of a reality that may not contain distances, edges, or extents in the ways we expect. There is no cosmic law that guarantees the universe must fit inside our mental categories. In fact, there is every reason to believe it cannot. Topology, the study of shape at the highest abstraction, reveals that objects can be continuous without boundaries, finite without edges, vast without volume. A universe could be shaped like a 3-dimensional analog of a Mobius strip, looping back on itself. It could be a hypersphere. It could be a manifold with no outside. It could be something so alien that mathematical description is possible, but visualization is not. And once space can take these forms, size loses meaning. What is the size of a universe that folds? What is the size of a universe that loops? What is the size of a universe whose true shape exists in dimensions we do not inhabit? The questions unravel, the answers slip away. But something else emerges, something liberating. The idea that the universe is not something we must measure, but something we must experience, something we participate in, something that transcends geometry and enters the realm of structure, relation, possibility, existence without edges, reality without boundary. And slowly, confusion softens into surrender. Because letting go of size is not losing understanding, it is gaining a higher one. It is recognizing that the universe does not shrink or expand to accommodate the human mind. It simply is boundless, not because it stretches forever, but because it refuses to be contained by the categories we inherited from a world of stones and rivers. We realize then that size is not a property of the cosmos. It is a story our neurons tell to make us feel oriented in a place that never promised orientation. A story that falls apart when confronted with curvature, expansion, dimensionality, and topology. A story that works for villages and continents but collapses in the presence of galaxies and gravitational horizons. And when the story collapses, we discover something unexpected. Not despair, not confusion, but liberation. Because a universe without edges is a universe without confinement. A universe that offers not boundaries, but openness. Not limits, but possibility. And in this openness, in this strange mathematical freedom, a quiet truth reveals itself. The universe does not care about size. Only minds do. There comes a moment after all the measurements fail and all the metaphors collapse when a strange clarity begins to form. A moment when the universe stops seeming enormous and starts feeling intimate. A moment when you realize that everything you once called big was never a property of the cosmos, but a projection of a mind still learning to see. Throughout this journey, we have stretched distances until they broke, stretched time until it dissolved, stretched understanding until the edges tore. But this tearing was not destruction. It was revelation, the peeling back of a cognitive illusion older than civilization itself. Because the universe was never overwhelming. It was our imagination that was overwhelmed. And so, we return to the question that sparked this entire exploration. Why does the universe seem so impossibly vast? The answer now feels different, softer, deeper, almost embarrassing in its simplicity. Because our ancestors navigated forests, not galaxies. Because our senses evolved to judge the length of a spear throw, not the age of the cosmic microwave background. Because our minds were never calibrated to hold infinity, and so infinity looked enormous. Like a child staring up at a cathedral, not realizing the cathedral is not tall. He's simply young. Every limit we encountered, distance, time, scale, visibility, dimension, was not a wall in the universe. It was a wall in ourselves, a boundary drawn by billions of years of evolutionary economy. The brain is efficient, not expansive. It is practical, not cosmic. It was sculpted to find berries, not beauty, to detect motion, not metaphysics, to fear predators, not ponder dark energy. And so the universe, when first confronted by such a mind, appeared absurdly large. But the absurdity was never in the universe. It was in the mismatch between the mind's architecture and the cosmos it tried to understand. Even now, our thoughts struggle to look at the full picture. When we imagine galaxies, we shrink them to glowing spirals that could fit inside our palms. When we imagine time, we compress billions of years into a timeline drawn on a page, pretending that this flattening reveals truth. When we imagine dimensions, we twist and fold three-dimensional shapes as if higher realities can be rendered by stretching shadows. These distortions are not mistakes. They are adaptations. The mind simplifies because it must. The universe expands because it can. And yet, as limited as we are, something remarkable happened. humans began to question their own boundaries. We began to push past intuition, past comfort, past the inherited geometry of our ancestors. We invented mathematics to extend our minds. We built telescopes to extend our eyes. We created philosophy to extend our meaning. Slowly, painfully, beautifully, our cognitive horizon grew. And with each expansion, the universe seemed to shrink, not because it was contracting, but because we were expanding. This is the quiet miracle of consciousness. It can transcend the tools that formed it. At the start of this story, the universe felt impossibly large. Now, after peeling back each illusion, the cosmos feels less like a giant and more like a mirror, a reflection of our developing awareness. The vastness we feared was merely the unfamiliar. The incomprehensible was merely the unpracticed. Our shock was the shock of a child hearing music for the first time. Consider how every step of this journey changed not the universe, but us. When kilometers failed, we invented light years. When light years failed, we invented megaparsecs. When megaparsecs failed, we invented mathematics. When mathematics failed, we invented humility. The universe did not grow. Our vocabulary did. The universe did not deepen. Our curiosity did. The universe did not lengthen. Our awareness stretched until it touched the edge of its own capacity. And then, in wonder, reached further. This is the moment when emotion floods the realization. Because now, we see that the universe has never been cruel in its vastness. It has been patient, waiting for us to grow into the ability to perceive it. And we are still growing. Every time a scientist stares at data that defies intuition. Every time a philosopher speaks of truth beyond language. Every time a child looks at the stars and feels something stir. The cognitive horizon expands a little more. Our descendants may look at the universe and find it obvious, even simple. Not because the cosmos changed, but because their minds did. Just as ants cannot grasp the concept of a continent, we struggle to grasp the cosmos. But a day may come when our species, or whatever we evolve into, will see effortlessly what we strain to imagine. And so, a profound empathy emerges, not for the universe, but for ourselves, for the small, fragile, wonderful minds trying so desperately to understand where they are. For the creature who evolved to see only 5% of reality, yet dared to chase the rest. For the consciousness that stared into the unknown and found enough courage to call it beautiful. We realize that our limitations are not failures, they are invitations, boundaries showing us where wonder begins, edges marking the places we have not yet grown into, questions revealing the shape of the room we are trying to outgrow. Because the universe has never been a place to measure, it has always been a place to become. This is the final realization. The universe is not vast. The universe is not overwhelming. The universe is not beyond comprehension. It is simply beyond current comprehension. It waits for us, patiently, silently, like a teacher who knows the student will one day outgrow him. All this time, we believed we were tiny creatures lost in an enormous cosmos. But what if the truth is gentler? What if we are young minds standing at the edge of an ever-expanding awareness? What if the universe feels big only because we haven't finished growing? And suddenly, size disappears, distance softens, time loosens, the fear fades. All that remains is wonder, a quiet luminous wonder that feels less like an answer and more like an opening. We look again at the night sky, not with intimidation but with recognition, not with confusion but with companionship, not with fear of the unknown but with gratitude for the chance to expand into it. And with that recognition comes a stillness so deep it feels like truth. The universe did not grow. We did. We return now to where this journey began, to the ancient question of scale, of distance, of cosmic immensity. But now the question feels different, as if softened by understanding. The paradox that once felt impossible now feels inevitable. The universe was never big. It was our minds that were small, tracing lines through a world they were not yet ready to comprehend. What changed was not the cosmos. It was the quiet widening of our perception. In this final reflection, the goal is not to offer answers. The universe seldom does. Instead, we sit together in a gentle awareness that our limitations are not barriers, but invitations. The cosmos does not shrink for us. We expand toward it. And with every new act of curiosity, every leap of imagination, every moment of wonder, the boundaries inside us stretch a little further. There is beauty in this smallness, not shame. To exist in a universe far larger than our comprehension means we always have something to grow into, something to reach toward, so something to awaken. The night sky becomes not a reminder of how tiny we are, but a reminder of how much we are capable of becoming. We are children of a universe that hides more than it reveals, yet grants us just enough light to continue our search. And maybe that is the point. Not to master the cosmos, but to let it open us, to let it shape us into beings who can hold more wonder than fear, more curiosity than certainty, more questions than conclusions. And as this realization settles, the narrative returns to silence. A silence not of ignorance, but of peace. And perhaps the universe was never big at all. Perhaps it is we who are only now beginning to grow.